The night air in the small town was cool and restless, brushing softly through the broken windows of an old bus station. On the cracked steps sat a boy no older than 15, his clothes faded, shoes torn at the edges, and his hair a little too long for his face. His name was Miguel, though few people ever bothered to ask. Most just passed him by, some tossing a coin, most pretending not to see. Yet those who listened closely might catch something unusual about this boy, a whisper of a melody that slipped out when he thought no one was around, a voice so raw, unpolished, and pure that it seemed to come from somewhere deeper than lungs, deeper even than the heart. Miguel sang quietly into the night, not to entertain, but to survive. His songs were a shield against loneliness, a prayer against hunger, and a way of telling the world he still existed. He had come from nothing, or at least from so little it felt like nothing. His mother had worked herself sick cleaning houses, and his father had disappeared when Miguel was still a child. When his mother passed away, he drifted like a leaf caught in the wind, sleeping in shelters or under awnings, surviving by odd jobs during the day and music at night. He had never been trained, never held a microphone or studied a single sheet of music, but when he sang, people sometimes slowed down. A tired worker on his way home might pause, a couple holding hands might glance over, or a child might tug at their mother's sleeve and whisper, "He sounds like the radio." But as quickly as they paused, they kept walking, and Miguel remained just a boy with a voice and an empty stomach. It was on one such night that fate, disguised in ordinary clothing, walked past him. A middle-aged man in a leather jacket, carrying a guitar case worn with travel stickers, stopped when he heard Miguel. The boy was singing softly, a half-remembered version of a song he had once heard blaring from a cafe, Hotel California. His voice cracked on some notes, soared on others, but it carried a weight, an ache, a truth. The man froze, caught in that sound. He had played in bands once, toured dingy bars and small festivals across the country, but he had never heard a voice like this, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. "Kid," the man said, and Miguel startled, clamping his mouth shut. "Where'd you learn to sing like that?" Miguel shrugged, eyes wary. "Nowhere. I just sing." The man studied him for a long moment. "Do you know what song that is?" "Not really," Miguel admitted. "I just remember some of the words." The man chuckled, shaking his head. "That's a Hotel California. One of the greatest songs ever written. You've got no idea what you're holding in your throat." Miguel looked down, embarrassed. He wasn't used to compliments. The man could have walked away then, like so many others, but something tugged at him. Maybe it was the way the boy's ribs showed through his shirt, or maybe it was the look in his eyes, the look of someone who had been overlooked too many times. "Listen," the man said, "there's a cafe down the street where I sometimes play open mic nights. Tomorrow, they're doing a special showcase. Come with me. Sing that song properly. I'll back you up on guitar." Miguel shook his head instantly. "I can't. I don't belong in places like that." "You belong wherever your voice takes you," the man replied firmly. "Trust me." The boy didn't know why, but he believed him. The next evening, Miguel stood outside the cafe, nerves crawling in his stomach like restless birds. Through the window, he saw people sipping coffee, laughing, talking. He had never been inside a place like this. His hands were trembling when the man, who introduced himself as David, placed a reassuring arm around his shoulder. "Just sing," he said. "Don't think about anything else." When Miguel stepped up to the small stage, the room barely noticed him. A skinny boy in ragged clothes, standing awkwardly under the dim lights, he looked out of place. A few people even frowned, whispering as if this was some kind of joke. Miguel's throat tightened, and for a moment, he almost ran. Then David strummed the opening chords on his guitar, and something inside Miguel unlocked. He closed his eyes, took a shaky breath, and began to sing. The first notes were fragile, like glass, but then his voice grew, trembling with emotion, carrying years of loss, hunger, and longing. Every word of Hotel California became something new in his mouth, not just lyrics, but pieces of his own story. On a dark desert highway, he sang, and suddenly the cafe was silent. conversation stopped. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Eyes turned to him, widening as they realized this was not just a boy, this was a soul speaking through music. By the time he reached the chorus, the air itself seemed to change. People leaned forward, goosebumps rising on their arms. Some closed their eyes to absorb the sound. It wasn't polished, it wasn't trained, but it was magic. A raw, unfiltered magic that wrapped around every heart in the room. When he sang the final lines, his voice breaking but burning with sincerity, there was a silence so deep it felt sacred. And then, as if breaking a spell, the entire cafe erupted in applause. Miguel opened his eyes in shock. People were standing, clapping, cheering. A woman wiped tears from her cheeks. A man at the back shouted, "Encore!" He had never seen or heard anything like it, and neither had Miguel. For the first time in his life, he felt visible. Word spread quickly. A video someone had taken on their phone was uploaded online that very night. Within days, it was everywhere. "Poor boy sings Hotel California with voice of an angel," the caption read. Millions clicked, shared, and commented. Strangers from across the world were moved by the boy with the raw, aching voice who turned an old classic into something new. Offers began pouring in, radio interviews, invitations to audition, even record labels expressing interest. But Miguel, still sleeping under the bus station, didn't know what to make of any of it. The attention could have gone to his head, but instead, it humbled him. For every message praising his talent, there were others sharing their own pain, telling him how his voice had reminded them of hope, of love, of resilience. Miguel realized he wasn't just singing for himself anymore, he was singing for all those who had ever felt invisible. The turning point came one evening when David found him staring at his phone, tears in his eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked. Miguel handed him the screen. It was a message from a single mother in Ohio. She wrote, "My son has been battling cancer. He loves music, but he's been too weak to play his guitar lately. We watched your video together, and for the first time in weeks, I saw him smile. Thank you. You gave him light when we needed it most." Miguel wiped his face with the back of his hand. "I didn't know. I didn't know I could do that for someone." David smiled softly. "That's the power of music when it's honest. You're giving people more than a song. You're giving them yourself." Weeks later, Miguel stood on a real stage, this time in front of thousands. The lights were brighter, the audience louder, but the boy was the same. He wore new clothes now, gifted to him by strangers who wanted to help, but his heart remained rooted in humility. As he sang Hotel California once again, his voice stronger but just as raw, he felt the presence of his mother in the crowd, smiling, telling him she was proud. And when the audience rose to their feet in thunderous applause, Miguel understood that his journey was no longer just about survival, it was about connection, healing, and giving back. He never forgot the nights on the bus station steps, nor the kindness of the man who believed in him. With every stage he graced, he set aside a portion of his earnings to support homeless shelters and fund music programs for underprivileged children. "Every voice deserves to be heard," he would say. Even the ones no one notices at first. Miguel's story became more than a viral moment, it became a testament to what can happen when compassion meets talent, when someone chooses to see rather than ignore, when generosity lights the path for a lost soul. He had been just a poor boy with a broken pair of shoes, but through one act of kindness and the magic of a song, he became a symbol of hope for millions. And perhaps the greatest magic of all was this: the boy who once sang to keep himself alive now sang to keep others from giving up.